Hello guys, welcome to Acquiring Movement Skills Screencast Exam 3. I'm just going to warn you on this one. This is going to be the tougher questions. So basically, these are questions that will require some interpretation. There'll be questions you might not have covered in class. That's why they're on here. So they're kind of ones that, you know, they're the worst case scenario questions that could come up. So hopefully you've had some access to them before the exam comes. So normal kind of exam success cycle. Look at the allocation, circle where you think it's important. There will be somewhere there's not memory methods for these because they're interpretation questions. So you've got to apply two concepts together, translate your information into an extended example. So going on from there then. First one, identify movement skill, justify its placement on discrete, serial and continuous continuum. So this is a singular movement skill. It's saying identify one movement skill. When you've got the skill, can you then justify whether it's a discrete, a serial or a continuous skill? You do not say define discrete, define serial, define continuous. If it wants you to do that, it will say describe discrete, serial, continuous skills. Use a supporting example. It doesn't say that. One movement skill, justify its placement on that continuum. Now, I'm going to ask you to use triple jump, okay? Triple jump, and then work out which one of those it is. And then what it says is explain the practice types that will be most appropriate for your chosen skill. So then what we have to do is try and think of all practice types you've used this year and think about which ones will be suited and why to that particular type of skill. Now, if you're saying now, if I go through, I'll just talk you through this one. So you look in here, so triple jump is a serial skill because it has several discrete elements joined together, 1, 2 marks. Now what you can do is you can use a variety of practices as long as you can justify why they'd be effective. So probably the most effective one would be progressive part practice because it allows a cognitive performer to progressively chain separate subroutines together without kind of having a high level of perceptual load or information processing. So you kind of get one, join together, learn another one, join it onto the other two. So it reduces the information processing load than having to do 4 movements in one. Part practice, why is that? Could that be effective? Very similar, because if you get success, if a cognitive performer gets success at, say, for example, the hop, okay, that gives them confidence. So by splitting it into parts when they get success at the separate parts, that can be really effective and help out for confidence. Whole practice, if you decided you were going to do it as whole, that would be really good for autonomous performance because it allows the development of fluency and kinesthesis that's relevant to the skill. Finally, fixed practice would definitely be the practice type you would use for this because ultimately the triple jump conditions never change. Okay, at the end of the day, you have to do run up, a hop, a step, and a jump. That is always going to be the same. There's no one trying to tackle you when you're doing a triple jump. So a fixed practice because the conditions do not change. Tough question. Get your head around it because it could be any of the continuums. Next one, for each of the 3 phases of learning, describe the use of different types of guidance to aid the learning of movement skills. Again, this can be tough, so you need to probably have a look at this. Where do you get your marks? You get a mark for identifying the phases of learning. You get your second mark for linking the correct type of guidance to the correct phase of learning. Now, you can actually have any type of guidance with any phase of learning, but I want to just teach you this so you have a specific way of doing it. So I'm hoping most people would think, right, one of the characteristics of the cognitive phase of learning is to create a mental picture of the movement skill they're supposed to be doing. That's what they're trying to do. So therefore, that would tell you that the best type of guidance for the cognitive phase of learning is going to be visual guidance, okay, because it allows the performer to create a mental picture. You've got to justify why. Associative then, associative mechanical guidance is a fantastic way of kind of allowing a performer to develop kinesthesis for more complex skills. It allows them to make a link to more complex skills. So for example, a trampoline, you might have a harness that you kind of allows a performer to practice a front flip, okay, using that. So basically it allows them to kind of improve complex skills in a safe environment for associative performers. Okay, you've got to link it to complex skills. Autonomous then, remember this is easy as well. It's only associative that requires a little bit of work, I think, because autonomous, remember we always said, verbal guidance is most effective for autonomous performers because detailed instructions can lead to in-depth tactical information for elite performers, for example, team talks, etc. Okay, moving on then. Mass distributed fixed variable practice, you need to describe them using supported examples, and then can you give one advantage and one disadvantage? So it's just the advantage and disadvantage for fixed and variable. So basically then what we're looking for, remember the key discriminator between mass and distributed is to do with kind of intervals, okay, and the key discriminator between fixed and variable is whether conditions change or not. That's what we're looking at. Change conditions, conditions don't change. practice with breaks, practice without breaks. That's all you're thinking, and then you need to give an example of something within it, and then can you give one advantage and one disadvantage just for fixed and variable. So mass practice then. Continuous practice with no breaks. Okay, or no intervals, e.g. free throws in basketball. So you imagine now you kind of just having 50 free throws over and over and over again. Someone's throwing to them. It's fantastic for autonomous performers because they're motivated to learn skills. And secondly, it's really good because it allows the skills to be grooved. It also works well for discrete skills that have a clear beginning and end and they're done over and started and finished very quickly. You can pick any one of those, whichever one you feel. If you're talking about autonomous, you have to talk about because they're motivated to keep doing it over and over again. Disadvantage, obviously keep doing something the same thing over and over again. It can be tedious, especially for cognitive. It can also be bad for dangerous skills because if you could get tired continuously practicing with no intervals, it could cause a fatality in sports such as swim. Distributed practice then, practice with intervals, okay, often used for mental rehearsal and feedback. So you have a break, do some bit of practice, have a break, practice, break. In that break you can either visualize successful performance or get feedback from a coach. Okay, e.g. sprint starts. So because sprint starts are so exhaustive, it's one of those things where you would need a break after just to get your breath back and think about your technique for the next time. Fixed practice, the conditions do not change, e.g. shot put. Okay, varied practice conditions do change. For example, and 5 versus 3, I haven't put that in there, so make sure you've got that. 5 versus 3 in football, working on possession or passing. Okay, so you have an overload of attackers versus defenders. The advantage of varied practice are huge because if you're practicing in changing conditions, it allows you to develop schema, which remember are those modified motor programs that can be adapted to new situations. It's also fantastic for open skills because all open skills are affected by environmental change, and obviously autonomous performers will be better suited to varied practice because they are used to changing environment, so they've already practiced these skills in a fixed environment and they've kind of grooved the motor program. And going from there then, disadvantage, it's not so effective for cognitive because it can become confusing, okay, when doing varied practice because all the conditions changing can become confusing if they haven't learned the skill in a kind of fixed practice first. Okay, moving on then. Next one. Intrinsic, extrinsic, terminal, and knowledge of performance feedback. You need to provide an example and give an advantage and disadvantage of each. There's repetition, I know, but I'm really conscious of this being a 10-mark question. I want your last session to be on that. So can you now start to think about advantage and disadvantage of those 4 types? Okay, so remember each of them have a translation word. Intrinsic, okay, remember that links to sensory, extrinsic, external source, terminal, end, knowledge of performance, technical quality. So going from there then. Intrinsic feedback, sensory feedback such as kinesthesis, for example, a gymnast readjusting on a beam, okay, so or a handstand. Advantage for that is it's really good for autonomous performance because they have a motor program. Maybe don't put the perceptual trace, memory trace, just put motor program. Disadvantage, not so effective for cognitive as they don't have a memory trace, perceptual trace, or motor program by which they can kind of use as a reference point. Motor program's fine. If you want to talk about perceptual trace or kinesthesis, that's fine. Extrinsic, feedback from information from an external source such as a coach. Coach on a netballer use good passing technique. A coach physically moving someone's hand position for topspin in tennis. Advantage for extrinsic feedback is it's fantastic for cognitive performance because they don't have any kinesthesis of the successful movements. They don't have motor programs stored. However, the disadvantage is that beginners can become reliant on extrinsic feedback, and most importantly, it prevents intrinsic feedback or kinesthesis being developed. Terminal then is information received after a movement, at the end of a movement. I think I've used in the lessons. So, e.g., coach giving feedback straight after a golf swing, or the golf swing could be. You could feel the feedback yourself. So you have a golf swing, it's a ballistic skill, you feel that you've hit too early, and next time you try and hit a little bit later. Okay, so going from there then, mainly used by autonomous performers because they have an understanding, I got that wrong. Advantage, it's good for discrete skills that have a clear beginning and end, or ballistic skills that are fast. If the gap between the feedback is too long, you can forget. Final knowledge of performance and information of technical quality. You've done this before, can be external or kinesthesis. So it's mainly used by autonomous performers because, again, they have that motor program stored. It's not great for knowledge cognitive performers because they don't have a kinesthesis or a motor program by which to compare the kinesthesis when they're performing. So, for example, an elite cricket player knowing that they've hit the sweet spot or middled a drive, okay, knowing they've hit it with good timing. Next one, last question. Explain how operant conditioning can be used to promote the adoption of balanced, active, healthy lifestyle. The triggers you're using for these. Okay, what type of theory is it? What type of learning theory? What are those? So once you've got that word, what is that word trying to do between what two things? Then what are the 4 stages of operant conditioning? Okay, so if I just went through quickly there, you've got onto this. So first stage involves manipulating the environment. Second stage involves multiple attempts. Third stage involves success leading to a behaviour or response being formed. And finally, you have 3 types of these to strengthen the SR bond. So basically, if you have a look through on here, then it's a connectionist theory. What you're trying to connect, you're connecting an SR bond or strengthening a stimulus response bond. How do you do it? You structure the conditions, manipulate the environment. So the key aim then is that, you know, if you're structuring conditions in a school and you're trying to encourage healthy eating, you'd have a healthy food menu or healthy options menu. Then you would experiment or try as many different healthy foods as possible. Okay, then as a result of finding successful response, e.g. you like one of the healthy foods or you find some healthy foods that you like, this can shape your behaviour towards a healthy eating response. Then, once you've shaped your behaviour, the thing that can make this permanent or really cement that kind of behaviour is the use of reinforcement. So remember, positive reinforcement is praise, so you might get a healthy eating certificate at the end of a 6-week programme. Negative reinforcement could be the removal of a negative stimulus. So, for example, it could be a removal of negative comments regarding weight, okay, when you eat healthily. So that removal of a negative stimulus, e.g. bullying, could then lead to a strengthened SR bond towards healthy eating and weakened SR bond towards unhealthy eating. Finally, punishment, okay, so you might get caught smoking and you're then grounded for smoking. Negative stimulus, the reason why your parents ground you is they're trying to weaken the SR bond towards the unhealthy lifestyle, e.g. smoking, but strengthen the SR bond towards the healthy lifestyle, which is not smoking. Okay, there's your questions. Get them done, please.